Commencing countdown.
3, 2, 1.
This is the contracting experience, connecting government contracting professionals to the world around them through conversations with acquisition influencers, insights into evolving hot topics, and sharing lessons learned from the field.
What can you learn from establishing a new contracting squadron? For the first time in Department of Defense history, there was a transfer of a military base from one service to another. It was Joint Base Anacostia-Bolling transferred from the Navy to the Air Force in October 2020. Major Ruben Arredondo was tagged to assist in the effort. Then he was selected as commander of the 11 cons unit that he would need to build and lead for the first time. In this episode, Major Arredondo shares what his biggest challenges were and what he learned from the experience that he will take with him to future assignments. Welcome, Major Arredondo, to the podcast.
Hello, Amber. Thanks for having me. It's awesome to have this opportunity to share with the contracting community some of the details to our journey here at 11 Cons and what we've been up to for over the past few years. So thanks for hosting this session.
Yeah, of course. So can you give us an overview of the mission of Joint Base Anacostia-Bolling?
Absolutely. So if your listeners are anything like I was when I first heard of JBAB is what we refer to it as. So I'll be referencing JBAB. It's Joint Base Anacostia-Bolling. But in any case, I had very limited knowledge when I first heard of this installation and the mission here. So just a little bit of the background for folks that are, kind of gee whiz information. This installation is about 960 acres on the south side of DC, just north of National Harbor, along the Potomac River. If you're ever at Reagan Airport at DCA and you look across the water there, you'll be looking at the installation. And this base was originally built on land that was purchased in 1917 by then U.S. Army Captain Billy Mitchell. So throughout history, it's transitioned. It was originally a training location for the Army Air Corps and Navy pilots, but there's currently no active runway. We do have a flying mission, a rotary mission, and that's Marine One, the president's helicopter. But in 2005, the BRAC, the Base Realignment and Enclosure Commission, they decided to combine Bolling Air Force Base and Naval Support Facility Anacostia to establish a joint base, and that effort began in October of 2010. So it operated in that manner for 10 years essentially, up until October of 2020. And that's when the base went through a lead service transition, transferring the lead service from Navy led and Air Force as a supporting component, and with that it brought back the 11th Wing, the Chief's own, to JBAB. And during that time, that 10 years, the 11th Wing had moved over to Andrews. So they essentially became the 316th Wing. Once JBAB stood up again. JBAB and JBA, Andrews, we both fall under Air Force District of Washington, which is a direct reporting unit to the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And in the 11th Wing, we're home to the U.S. Air Force Band, the U.S. Air Force Honor Guard, the headquarters U.S. Air Force Chaplaincy, and we've got about, I'd say, 73. We're up to 73 joint and interagency mission partners. So the installation itself is not a huge footprint, but very important tenets for sure.
Can you explain the Department of Defense's decision to transfer the lead service from the Navy to the Air Force?
So yeah, that's a great question. And I guess the best way I can explain it, so the Department of Defense ID'd a problem statement, and it came down to resourcing. So the joint base resourcing construct significantly constrained the AFDW's commander his ability to prioritize the installation and mission support resources here at JBAB. And I think they determined that the Air Force had the greatest mission equity of all the tenants. So I think the memo came out September 6th of 2019. The Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force at the time, General Stephen Wilson, and the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Robert Burke, they directed the Senior Base Working Group to prepare and approve a new MOA, a Memorandum of Agreement for the services. And this MOA would be submitted to the Vice Chiefs for execution, and then to be tracked by the Senior Installation Management Group, the SIMG. So that MOA, it consisted of about $122 million in total obligation authority, the transfer of 503 full-time equivalent positions with an additional projected 469 FTEs that would be hired on. And the Air Force would essentially have an annual operating budget of $65 million. So the MOA itself, there were four main elements to that MOA, and I'll briefly go over these four. The land exchange was a big one. Essentially the Navy and the U.S. Park Service had been in discussions and negotiating the land swap of the northern side of the base, and that agreement would go through. It's still in process. It hasn't completed yet, but essentially a portion of this base, the very top of the base, will transition over to the U.S. Park Service. And currently one of our CDCs are located in that area, CDC number 3. So the agreement is, that facility, that building will be demolished, and the Park Service will gain that, and in exchange they will build us a CDC somewhere else on the existing footprint. So we'll get a new CDC out of it. The levee repair is the other is a second piece to that MOA, and this I think the early estimations are $63 million to repair that. Personally, I think that's on the low end. I think it's going to come in a lot higher, actually. But the Navy's on the hook to fund the design of the repair, and then the actual repair will be an expense that the Air Force has to pony up. So the third piece of that MOA is the adjudication of the maintenance responsibilities to some of the tenants that we have here at the installation, specifically the Marine Helicopter Squadron. It's a Navy, actually it's a Marine organization, so they will be supported. But we've got other important tenants: White House Communications Agency, the Joint Air Defense Operations Center, the JDOC, Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, the Coast Guard, Air Force Ceremonial Guard, Navy Ceremonial Guard, NCIS, the Rapid Capabilities Office, Secret Service, and as I mentioned before, there's in total, I think we're up to 73 mission partners. So with that is going to be all the support agreements that come along with the care and feeding. So the wing will take care of installation needs. Mission will belong to the tenants, but there's always those gray areas, and we'll have to come out with our LRS squadron is working that effort, and I'm not sure exactly where they are with those agreements, but nonetheless, they will get done. And then last but not least, the facilities capitalization on the Anacostia side. So this base, the entire installation, the facilities have endured some wear and tear. So just the effort to bring them up to acceptable standards, I think that's a focal point. So these are key elements to this MOA.
So at what point in the process did you get involved in the planning of setting up a new contracting squadron at Joint Base Anacostia-Bolling?
So yeah, that's a great question. I think looking at my tenure here, it's a little different than the other commanders. I actually arrived as a manual assist in 2019 as just a TDY, really a 6-month TDY. Over to Joint Base Andrews to kind of help out with a few other manual assists. And, our responsibility at the time, it's, this is a first time in DoD history that they're transitioning lead service authority from one service to another, and we have to kind of coordinate and plan and really just get involved in this Tiger team. There was a couple of folks at AFDW that were working the effort before I got there as kind of an additional duty, as Mr. Craig Davis and Captain Alex Dials of PK actually come to the 11th cons, but at the time he was at PK. So I settled in and I started planning out. I'd sync up with the other planners and we would report to the lead planner to provide our inputs. I would provide the acquisition contracting inputs and any suggestions or concerns. And, he'd take all these inputs and we would report up to the AFDW commander. And we would also meet with our Navy counterparts to kind of, just talk through and really plan out what this was supposed to look like. So again, at the time, for those first few months, my understanding was I'm here as, kind of planning it out and really just trying to set up this team for success. Around mid-February, my director at my home station asked me to reach out to FaceTime with them actually, and we'd touch base occasionally, phone calls just to make sure that my needs were being met, and I was doing the things that I needed to be doing. So he asked me to FaceTime, and I thought that was odd. I very rarely did I FaceTime with them. So I'm actually, this was after work. I'm heading out of JBA and headed over to JBAB. Actually, I think I had a site visit for something. And, I was like, sure, I can FaceTime. I think I actually pulled over at the McDonald's. Yeah. During that call, he informed me that the opportunity had presented itself and I was selected to be that initial commander of the 11 cons. So, that was exciting for me, thrilling for me, as you can imagine. I think, for those that have gotten the nod to command, I mean, that's what we kind of, target during our careers as officers. So, I had hoped for a command. I never expected to be matched at JBAB. So, very exciting. I think the excitement, I'm not going to say it wore off. I guess the best way to put it is I put the excitement aside for a minute and I'm going into a unit that doesn't necessarily exist yet. And I think I initially, just started to get the overwhelming and, oh my gosh, this is I hope I was planning well because I'm the recipient of the plans now. So, I immediately reached out to pretty much everyone the graduated commanders that I knew, personal friends. And, I have to say there's a few folks that really, just gave me some good advice and the confidence I needed. If I can, I want to, give a shout out to, Lieutenant Colonel Brian Williams, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Barrios, Major Frank Chavone, Lieutenant Colonel Brandon Sandoval, Lieutenant Colonel Will Chang, Keith Philippandit, and Terrence Montecito. Those guys, they really, they gave me that, hey, you're going to do great. You're going to do fine. And they gave me some to share the knowledge and experience that they had. I will be honest. I reached out to folks that I hadn't necessarily talked to in a while on Facebook and started, friending folks that I knew had commanded. And I'm sure they were on the other side, like, what is this guy? I never talked to this guy. Why is he friending me? But yeah, they, friend requested, I sent out, hey, I'm taking command. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. So, and it was good. I think, just, getting some of that feedback and, it goes a long way from folks that have been there and they, they just kind of give you that wisdom that they have.
Yeah.
So,
and can we also highlight the fact that you realize like, hey, I might need some help here. And you were willing to like put yourself out there and reach out to get kind of like a support system in place. And I think that's something that's super important to highlight because as people are moving up in leadership roles that are leaders of their teams, sometimes we feel like we have to take it all on our own shoulders, but really, if you want to be successful, being able to reach out and be vulnerable is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, kudos to the folks that were willing to share and just kind of give me that certain level of comfort that, hey, everything's going to be fine. You're going to do great. So that was
Yeah.
one piece. Some of the enlisted, actually all of the enlisted folks that were slated to go over to the 11 cons, I had seen their names on the roster, and part of my planning was to make sure that I was, coordinating for their arrival. So when I realized, I would be the commander, I immediately drafted an email to send out to the folks that would be coming on to the squadron, and just kind of let them know who I was. But in addition to that, just set their expectations and saying, hey, it's going to be kind of a learning process for all of us. Don't expect everything to be established when we get there, because that's not going to be the case. And then really just said, hey, if there's any best practices that you have at your current squadron, by all means, I think we're going to need all the help we can get. So bring some of those best practices over to us, and we can incorporate them into our processes. So yeah, it was. I guess I was a little rattled at first, but I think once I started to just jump into, okay, now it's real. Let's start to put these plans into action. Then I think it. I started to settle in and get excited about it. Sure.
Major Arredondo, can you highlight some of the bigger challenges you faced in setting up the new unit? Sure.
Yeah, no, that's that's a great question. And I think, the way I've kind of reflected on this is this mission, this task of standing up my operation. It really, when you look at it, it's three main efforts, right? It's standing up the squadron itself, sure. But it's also the day-to-day support to the mission partners, my fellow commanders and lieutenants, and then also the strategic vision, what this wing is supposed to look like down the road. So leadership understood this wasn't going to happen overnight. It wasn't hey, Air Force shows up and we flip the switch and from one day to the next we're up and running. That's just not realistic. So they kind of gave us the initial operating capability status, the IOC status, beginning on October 1, 2020. And the expectation was at the 2-year mark, October 1, 2022, we would be fully operation capable. And what that means is, so during IOC, we really had the latitude to operate in kind of a gray area where we can still utilize Navy processes, but the intent is to establish our own Air Force processes as we're transitioning. But we didn't have to deal with deployments or inspections and exercises and stuff like that. We were kind of given a grace period. So yeah, as we begin to build out, the understanding is not everything is fully up and running. Keep in mind the other my fellow squadrons here, they weren't fully up and running, and they were still trying to go through the same stand up that I was. They still had the option to utilize Navy processes, and in some ways it made sense. I think for us, the challenge was anytime they opted for that, say an existing Navy contract vehicle to leverage, that was kind of counter to the 11 cons progress. So it was a constant back and forth. We would kind of talk it out and figure out what made sense. But yeah, so for FOC, the expectation is that we will look like and operate like any other Air Force Joint Base installation, self-sustaining with common Air Force processes that we're all following and adhering to. So yeah, the stand-up, I think I was very fortunate. Again, I was on the front end of this, so I got to see the planning side of it. I got to see the intent of AFDW leadership and what their desires were for us and the timelines established. But as the wing stood up, that Tiger team, they all, kind of, I guess, redeployed back to their home stations, and, they disbanded. So it was a new team of commanders and the folks that were new to the wing. So it was kind of a different perspective. I kind of had that history, but not a whole lot of other folks did. So some of my other fellow commanders were coming from school or their previous assignments. So they kind of hit the ground, kind of assess the situation, and we all kind of teamed it out. I think the biggest thing was really for me, I would say expectation management. For my folks and I guess for everyone here at the wing, when dealing with standing up a operation, I will say it's historic, first time in DoD history. Sure, we get that title, but understand, these things happen downrange on a regular, and I would say even stateside and other places where units get stood up and established. Probably not to this magnitude, but it's a similar process that I know has happened, throughout DoD's history, of course. So, but I guess downrange, the biggest difference is most folks, if they're going into that situation, they understand that, the be a minimalistic environment. So you kind of go into that with that understanding. Here in DC, contingency operations to establish and then to have the expectation that everything will at some point be up and running as it should. I think it was a challenge for sure. I think that a difference with DC as opposed to downrange, I've seen it to where, there's this kind of the RIP TOA mindset where you might have a division, like say, 1st Infantry Army Division's in place. There's a relief in place and a transfer of authority, the RIP TOA. You might have, like, say, a 10th Mountain Division that comes in, and essentially it's a right seat, left seat. They kind of go over processes, and then, the first unit will bug out of there, and then the folks that came in will take over. And you may have a few folks that stick around and kind of the enduring footprint to help facilitate that transition and to keep things going. It wasn't necessarily the case for us. I think the Navy's processes are different enough to where it wasn't, the Air Force shows up and just takes over. Again, we didn't have a cons. We didn't have, I think, the LRS was a public works function that transitioned over to civil engineers for support. I think they had their, a unit that was handling the CDCs, the club, the bowling alley, all that stuff. So, there was the continuity here in place, and so for them it looked a little bit different. But for us, we were no kidding standing up from essentially nothing. And JBA, the folks over at Andrews, they helped out. They had their own mission and some bandwidth limitations. So, the help was there, but it was kind of limited. We try to, again, the objective is for us to be able to stand up on our own. So, I think in setting up the cons, I think it was huge being part of the front end. And then obviously seeing the struggles with the commanders. We didn't necessarily have those issues. We got off to a quick start. The contracting community, the leadership really helped me out by, sending folks that didn't have the train burden. I didn't get anyone, out of tech school or just a brand new contracting person. These were all folks that were, experienced, ready to go. So, we took off, and as you can imagine, I mean, it was, I think we had 12 or 14 to start off with, individuals to start off with. And, everybody had a slew of additional duties. And, we all knew it's like, hey, we kind of have to start up a program just to have it in place. And at some point we will divest of these additional duties as we bring more folks into the squadron. Say, one thing I noticed from some of the other commanders, again, some came from school, and, I think they would kind of look at the issues and maybe have a textbook solution. And unfortunately here in the real world, and, just applying a practical solution, sometimes it didn't quite work out. So I know there was I guess a point that I noticed where I think some of the other commanders, it became clear that this mission was going to be a little complex. And I think it was one of our planning sessions, and one of the folks mentioned, hey, why don't we just contract it out? Let's just hire a bunch of contractors, and we'll we'll get the ball rolling, and this should be a good thing. And I saw some of the other folks kind of nod their heads like, yeah, that might be a way to go, and I wasn't so on board with that. One, I think they were having issues just managing the service contracts that they had, just the cores in place and everything else. And I thought, what, this is going to be, I think, counter to what we're trying to do. And personally, I just felt like, the Air Force didn't bring us here as commanders to contract the work out for someone else to do it. They brought us here to get it done. And yeah, there was, contract support, sure, but I didn't think that was the answer, the overarching answer. I thought, no, it's going to be hard, but that's just the way it is, and that's why we're here. Mm-hmm. So, that was, kind of a, just trying to, paint that picture and get that message out. As you can imagine, it wasn't so well received, but I think they understood, and I think as time progressed, we all kind of accepted, like, yeah, that's just why we're here. So, obviously, I guess I can just throw it out there. COVID, it impacted everybody. Mm-hmm. So, the telework and just the struggles with, we're all new. We're all trying to form an identity, and if you're never seeing your coworkers, we dealt with the isolation and the anxiety and all that other stuff, and it was a challenge. It really was. I tried to be in the office as much as I could. Not so much for the reason I did that was for myself, if I'm being honest. I needed that sense of normalcy. I needed to be sitting in an office doing work in what a traditional office. I just needed that. And I think if things started to fall apart, or if I dropped the ball, I wanted to personally physically drop the ball. I didn't want to virtually drop it. I wanted to physically be there and potentially pick it back up if I could. It was a level of security that I felt going to an office. I think it was mental for me. But yeah, we certainly had our challenges with the telework. We had we did the virtual socials, and we tried to sync up when we could as a group, and it was a give and take. So yeah, that was definitely something that kind of I think made us adjust fire for sure. Then I have to mention the day-to-day support. It seems like there's always something going on here in DC. I mean, it for lack of a better word, it seems to be the epicenter at times. And I think right off the bat, I mean, we had the CSAF transition from General Goldfein to General Brown here. Civil unrest, it just seemed like that was an ongoing thing. The inauguration and all the support that went along with that. It was just, if I think about it, it's just so easy to get rattled or overwhelmed when you think about the nature of what we're doing. And, right. The Pentagon's here. It's such a high vis thing that we're trying to accomplish. And again, when you throw in historic, first time ever in DOD, it can get very overwhelming very quickly. Yeah. So we constantly had to just say, you know what, let's just focus on this mission and do the best we can. And I think we'll be okay. So that was, those were some of the things that, kind of went through our minds. I think with regards to execution and contracts themselves and transitioning, that kind of took on a few different iterations itself. And that was, I would say, mostly or by and large to factors beyond our control. The cons is, we were constantly in reactive mode. I think the initial thought was, we're going to get here and transition as many of these service contracts as quickly as we can. That way we're not kind of asking the Navy to constantly, kind of help us out or to administrative support or whatever. We were under the impression that there was, some of our mission partners had these on the shelf ready to go packages, and it didn't really play out that way. I think some of what we had that we thought was ready to go might have been ready for the previous mission, but for this current mission, there was some tweaking and fine tuning. Again, just some of the bandwidth with folks not being able to PCS or to bring folks on in a timely manner. even the hiring. I mean, as the listeners here and the contracting community knows, 1102s it's just hard to bring them on, and you put that in, apply that to the NCR and then our mission. It's an uphill battle. But again, I think the COVID kind of slowed us down a little bit. We had to adjust fire. The Navy itself, the NAVFAC leadership changes with their acquisition leadership and directors. I think there was I think we're on number 3 now. The first individual that we kind of worked with on the planning side of it, he was okay with Air Force COs administering some of the Navy contracts. The ones that we brought over from Public Works, we brought over 4 individuals with Navy warrants. So, our plan was just to have them continue to administer. And he was fine with that. The second individual, it was the direction he was given to say, no, we're not okay with that. The Navy is gonna not be okay with that. So, he allowed the Air Force a grace period. He allowed us to, here's a window where you can, try to close out and do what you can, but we're going to turn those warrants off. So, we try to transition some of these service contracts into Con IT, but then we ran into pay and admin issues, and we had to kind of, we took a few steps forward, then had to take a few steps back. And, this latest, the Navy, they kind of gave us a, hey, at FOC, we're turning off support to you guys. And I think we're actually okay with that. Again, we're on the receiving end. I think if we really, push back and got the higher ups involved, we could probably, influence that. But I think it kind of needs to happen that way. We just need to divest from their support. And I think we will. I think we've got a few hanging out there that'll transition, and we should be fine. But it's been so issues. I when I think back to where we started, I mean, it's kind of surreal to think, I got here, base housing wasn't ready for me. My unit wasn't ready. We didn't have anywhere. We didn't have an office. I'm taking calls at the hotel parking lot in my car while my kids are up asleep in the hotel room. And, I've got a little pad that I'm taking notes on my knee to where we're at now, to where we've got, our offices and processes in place. And I think by and large, the cons is, we're ready to go. We're excited to get to FOC for sure.
That's great. So what did you learn from this experience? What will you take with you to future assignments?
Yeah, no, this experience has been invaluable. I've learned so much. I think first off, there's a few things, but first off, just like any other commander, first-time commander, just the usual stuff, mission success, it really is tied to the leadership and your peers and then the subordinates in your unit. And all 3 have to be supported in order to have success. I think the leadership and the peer relationships, it's in some cases personality driven. It's a give and take. And I think it's really for me as an individual, it's up to me to be able to assess the environment. There is a standard. I think the expectation for a commander, carry yourself in a certain way. And I think throughout our careers as officers, we're kind of trained up to that, to where when we get to that point, we're ready to go. But I think, the subordinates, that's, man, it's up to me to be responsible and to take care of my folks. I can't let them get burnt out. I have to provide that top cover. So for me, it was an adjustment. I think throughout my career, I've always been, hey, you're responsible for yourself as an individual. And a few opportunities I've had to kind of taste of it, but when you are, no kidding, the commander, there's a sacrifice that comes along with that. Your needs and whatever your kind of objectives to career wise or whatever. It kind of takes a backseat to your people. It has to. So I have to put my needs aside and make sure that my folks are not getting burnt out. My folks are not, unfairly being, targeted, when things go south, because I think as contracting knows, I mean, when things go south, process, and then to look at contracting, right? So I had to provide that top cover. That was very important to me. But also, just make sure that they had the opportunities. This is a big deal. I had to, we had to bring the right folks to the mission, but then we had to empower them and allow them that opportunity to showcase their talents. Give them the responsibilities and reward them with recognition or whatever would be the motivator, because it varies for person to person. Mm-hmm. So that was fun. I think I'm excited to have an opportunity at some point in my career to be that person again. Forward, I think for anybody, when in your day-to-day or in your whatever task is ahead of you, stay focused, run the race that's set before you. I'll certainly hold on to that. The distractions are going to come, and there's nothing you can do about that. Situations will arise that they create an uncomfortable, uneasy feeling, and they may keep you up at night. I know I've had my nights of lost sleep for sure, but it really is it's important to know the resources, know my resources, use my resources, and then have confidence. I was selected. Leadership trusted that I could do this, and I have to be confident enough to execute, to make the decisions, and then to go with that. Again, knowing my resources, my team will tell you, I will constantly reference and say, hey, here's what's ahead of us. What are your thoughts? And, sometimes, I may not have the answer, they may have it. And that's okay. It's, how best do we address whatever's in front of us? So it's, I think there's a few lessons learned. I think, again, first time commander, I think it's not what you say, it's how you say it. I think I kind of started off just ready to go. And, I think the eagerness maybe from my side, I think some of the other folks were like, just not months to get ready to be part of it. And they show up and they just weren't quite there. And I had to understand that. And they had to learn to trust me. I think we all had to learn to trust each other. I think until they saw that this contracting team, we're a brand new squadron, but it doesn't mean these COs and contract specialists are brand new. We all know what we're doing. So once they saw us execute and perform, I think they were more willing to say, yeah, the cons, they got this, and good things started to happen. So it was awesome. It was good. Yeah.
Well, Major Arredondo, I want to thank you for sharing your story and your experience in setting up and leading the 11 Cons unit with the workforce.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And, it's been a wonderful journey. I've got one more year of command. So I am hoping for some kind of normalcy, and I'll be okay with not being the shiny new penny that everyone's looking at.
Yeah.
But we'll be ready for whatever comes. So it's been an exciting journey, and I'm just happy to have been a part of it. Absolutely. Thank you.
If you have suggestions for topics or people to interview or feedback on the podcast, you can submit those at thecontractingexperience@gmail.com. I want to thank you all for listening to the Contracting Experience podcast. Until next time, keep connecting to the world around you.